am so glad to have you here this morning. Welcome to the DeKalb County Solicitor-General's Office 5th Annual Domestic Violence Symposium. Once again, we are here to talk about coordinating a community response, building bridges, making connections to end domestic violence. Thank you for coming to our resource fair. And now I'd also like to welcome and thank all of you that are tuning in live at home on DCTV. Thank you so much for tuning in to see this event. Even if you could not be here live today, at home you're able to get this information. Thank you so much. I'd like to start off by thanking our co-sponsors of this event. We have Hedgepeth, Heradia and Reeder Law Firm, as well as the Smith and Lake Law Firm, who were sponsors of our event today, and without their help could not make this event possible. Also, as again for a 5th year, we are partnering with Verizon to collect phones for Hope Line. So if you've not had an opportunity to take your old phones to donate, we have a box here today, as well as a box in the solicitor's office here in downtown Decatur in the courthouse. You can still drop those off. We'll be collecting those through the end of the month. Those phones go to Verizon, where they can reuse those for survivors, or they can refurbish and resell those phones, and all the money goes to the Hope Line project to support events and to support the end to domestic violence. I'd like to also start off and thank all of our organizations that are here with us today, our community partners, with whom we could not do the great work that we do. I'd like to recognize them right now. We have a Hensma House. We have Caminar Latino. We have the Georgia Coalition Against Domestic Violence. We have the Georgia Commission on Family Violence. We have the International Women's House, Men Stopping Violence, Raksha, Ser Familia, Tapestry, the Women's Resource Center to End Domestic Violence, our Sheriff Mann, and the Sheriff's Department with us today, DeKalb County Police Department, Latin American Association, and finally the DeKalb Volunteer Lawyers Association. Thank you so much every day for partnering with us in order to end domestic violence, and thank you for being here to recognize all the work that we do and to spread this information out into the community. Once again, I am Sherry Boston. I am your DeKalb County Solicitor General. And sadly, here in DeKalb alone, my office investigates and prosecutes over 3,500 misdemeanor domestic violence cases each year. And the reason that we continue to do this symposium, and this is our 5th year, is that we know by coming together as a community, we can help save lives. And we're going to talk about that more as we go through today, and how important this symposium has been for the people whose lives have been touched by the information they heard, either by coming directly in here or by tuning in at home and watching this either live or in replay broadcast. And also, I'd also like to thank DeKalb County for being a partner, DCTV for being here, and once again, graciously making sure our message gets to so many more than the folks that are able to take time out with us today. Just as a reminder, again, we are live tweeting. So for those of you in the room and at home, if you hear something, a message that you want to spread or a speaker that you like, please go ahead and tweet out our message. Be sure to tag me at Sherry Boston SG. And today our hashtag is SG Says No More, because we are following the campaign today about no more domestic violence. We don't want to have a 6th annual domestic violence symposium. If we in the world can stop the epidemic that is called domestic violence, then we will no longer have to wear this purple. We will no longer have to have these ribbons. We will no longer have to come together and read the names of every person whose life is taken by domestic violence every year. Every person in this room would gladly give up their job in this line of work if we no longer had victims that we needed to serve. This is what this symposium is all about. 1 in 3 women will experience domestic violence in her lifetime. And by coming together in a community, we know we can prevent future cases of domestic violence. And we can help survivors get the assistance that they need. If you or you know someone who's suffering in an abusive relationship, I encourage you to talk to someone from my Special Victims Unit. And they're all trained. We have advocates that are trained to deal with that. And let me first start. I could not put on this event without the assistance of those in the Solicitor General's office. I'd like those of you in the Special Victims Unit, and I want everyone to please stand up. They're wearing these blue Oxford shirts so that they are readily identifiable. Please wave your hands. Thank you. Let's give them a round of applause. The folks that work in my Special Victims Unit, they help put this together, and it's wonderful. And they help facilitate our group conversation that started this morning. But more importantly, they're here to help today. And we're going to talk about this later. It's amazing that by just being here, we have touched victims. Every year, we have a victim that walks into this symposium and asks for help because they've either seen it on TV or they've seen in the paper and they say, this is where I can go to help. So if you came here today, or if you're sitting at home watching television and you want to know how you can get help and you're not sure what to do or where to go, we will be here. We will be in this room until 1 o'clock today. And after that, we'll be across the street in the courthouse. It doesn't matter when or where or what time you come. If you come and ask for help, we are here to help. But today, if you walk in this room and you see any one of these folks in these shirts, you just only need to say, help me, and we're there for you. So, it is the month of October, and those of us that work in this community know that this is the month where we try to raise awareness. It's not just about one month, it's about every day. It's about every day. But in October, we want to bring it to the forefront because we know that it is a national epidemic. I would encourage everyone also to continue working with us. Sign up as you come in for our newsletter. You can find information at the DeKalb Solicitor-General.org. That is our website. You can also find information about the DeKalb County Domestic Violence Task Force, also located on our website. So, with no further ado, I want to start the program because I want everyone to start hearing from our wonderful speakers and start hearing about how we can coordinate a community response to domestic violence, how we can say no more, how we can help the people in our lives that are screaming, sometimes silently, for our help, and how you can help be a part of all the organizations in this room as we fight to eradicate domestic violence, not only in DeKalb County, not only in the state of Georgia, but across the United States and the world. So first, let me introduce Barbara Gibson, who is the Safe House Director for the Women's Resource Center to End Domestic Violence. She will tell us today about the dynamics of domestic violence. Barbara has been providing advocacy to survivors at the WRC since 1990. And she served as the organization's family advocate for many years for becoming the Safe House Director. And let me just say, I've had the pleasure of going out and walking through the Safe House and meeting some of the women and families that have gotten the services of the Safe House. And I am so glad that in DeKalb County, we have a place, a safe place, a guarded place, a secret place for our victims to find shelter and safe haven. And being in DeKalb sometimes, I get spoiled when I'm surrounded by the amazing partners I have in this room. Because I know not every county in Georgia is so lucky. There are some counties in Georgia that don't even have an advocate in their county, that they have to travel to a different county to even get resources. So to be in a county where we have a safe house and where we have people like Barbara at the helm of that, it is an honor and a privilege, and I am so glad that we get to do the work we do every day. So help me in welcoming Barbara Gibson.
Good morning, everyone. As you know, I am Barbara Gibson with the Women's Resource Center, and I've been at the Safe House for some time. Excuse me. I wanted to start this morning by just giving us a little bit of context about the problem of domestic violence. I think Sherry said earlier that domestic violence impacts 1 in 3 women. And in the time that we've been here, that means that dozens of women have been impacted by domestic violence. We know that every 9 seconds a woman is harmed by domestic violence, and often we don't see what that looks like. We imagine that survivors have broken bones and bruises all the time, but sometimes they look exactly like we do. They look exactly like me. People who get up every morning, get dressed, and go to work and carry on with their lives. So you have to be careful to not assume that people have a certain look just because they're survivors of domestic violence. We know that domestic violence is one of the most common causes of emergency room visits, that there's a common statistic that says that it's more common than car accidents and other kinds of accidents combined, that women are sent to the emergency room by people that they love, by people that they trust, by people that they have given their lives over to in a relationship that they thought was going to be healthy and committed, but was instead frightening and scary and dangerous. And we also know that domestic violence is not something that impacts only a certain kind of person, not a certain race or a certain class, that again, it can happen to anyone at any time. In Georgia, domestic violence is probably the 12th in the nation for homicides. So that means that women, and overwhelmingly it is women, are likely to be killed because of domestic violence. Not because they've done anything wrong, not because there's a personal flaw that they have that causes them to be harmed, but just because. We know that domestic violence disproportionately impacts women, and we know that it's largely because women have been dehumanized, that the idea that we can make one person or one gender less important than another one and use that as an excuse to harm is something that women have to deal with every day. Now, what we want to remember again is that survivors are strong and capable people. And I think sometimes we get ourselves into a lot of trouble when we assume that we're dealing with people who are weak, who are flawed, who have done something to deserve to be harmed, because that's not the case. We also want to be really careful about understanding who batterers are. Batterers can be Little League coaches, they can be pastors, they can be great coworkers. We want to get ourselves away from the idea that batterers are only monsters, because if we assume that batterers are only monsters, then that means that there's something about the woman that the batterer is harming is bringing out in this person that's causing this to happen. And what we know instead is that batterers, again, are regular people. And we can't have an honest conversation if we assume that there's only one kind of person that's a batterer. There's an expression that goes, even a broken clock is right twice a day. So it's very complex, right? There are some good things going on, and there are also some bad things going on. And one thing that's really important for us as people who are doing this work, as individuals, as agencies, as communities, is to understand that just because a person is a good person, who jokes around with the kids, who does a great job, who saves money, who has a great sense of humor, it doesn't also mean that that same person isn't someone who causes extreme fear, who maybe does cause a broken bone, who does belittle, who does criticize, who does embarrass. We want to recognize that there is that dynamic of, I hate to say it, but Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, that it can exist. And we want to shy away from the idea that it doesn't exist, because what that means is if a woman presents that this is what's happening to her, then that means that she's crazy or she's making things up or there's something wrong with her. And again, we know that that's not the case. So again, why does domestic violence happen? And I talked a little bit before about the idea that there's a dynamic where genders are not valued equally, that we've come to the place where we've decided that, and I think men are great, but we've come to a place where we've decided that somehow men are more valuable than women. And what we want to recognize is that women and men are equally valued. And we also want to get ourselves away from the idea that as a culture, violence is not an appropriate response. And I think we've all embraced that kind of idea, that if someone does something that we don't like, if we're disappointed, if we're angry, if we're upset, if we want to change something, that violence is an appropriate response. And I think along a continuum, that's something that we're all struggling with. Think about us as parents, that we spank our children. Think about us as a country, we go to war. Think about us as law enforcement, we engage in capital punishment. If people are doing things that we don't like, we decide that we can use force to change their behavior. And really, domestic violence falls along that same continuum. I want to be in control of your behavior, and so I'm going to do something to make you do what I want you to do. I'm going to do something to impact your behavior with my violence, with my force, with my abuse. And that's really the goal of domestic violence, to control someone's behavior by any means necessary. So it's a very extreme use of coercion, where we engage in tools like harming, we engage in tools like reducing, we engage in tools like minimizing and dehumanizing. And when we dehumanize someone, we don't have to recognize their humanity. We don't have to recognize their full sense of a human being, and we get permission, because we've decided that this person is less than we are or not equal to us. We have permission to harm them or hurt them with impunity. Just thinking about domestic violence, it really is a pattern of harmful behaviors. Included in those are physical abuse. That's probably the one that we're most familiar with, and the one we think about most often when we think about domestic violence. We think about, being hit, being slapped, being punched, being kicked, and of course these things happen. But there are other things that happen as well. I think a little later on, my colleague Kim Frendeck's going to talk a little bit about some of the things that happen for women who are survivors of domestic violence. But in addition to physical abuse, there's also sexual abuse, forced sex, non-consensual sexual acts, emotional abuse, criticizing, belittling, embarrassing. Imagine you're out with your coworkers or you're out with a group of friends, and your partner or your husband, your significant other, says something that makes you feel bad about yourself or embarrasses you in front of your friends, makes you feel small. And these kinds of things, I think women often second guess. They think, well, he didn't hit me, he didn't punch me, but he did do something that made me feel kind of small inside. And that's really what I encourage women to think about. When someone does something to you that makes you feel small or doesn't feel quite right to you, and you have a conversation about it, and the response you get is just kind of blow it off, and this happens over and over again over a period of time, and it's a pattern, that's really something to pay attention to, because that means that your feelings are not being regarded. And in a relationship that's healthy, your feelings really do matter. That's a healthy exchange. Also, domestic violence can look like psychological abuse, where the person is throwing things, harming your pets, breaking things, just doing things that make you feel kind of like you're on guard, like you're walking on eggshells. You're never quite sure from one moment to the next what's going to happen. And you're constantly off balance. You're never exactly sure. In your home, the place where you expect to be able to relax and have some refuge and to kind of let your guard down, is a place where you really can't do that, because you're always wondering what's going to happen next. You really don't quite know. And living in that heightened state of awareness, heightened state of anxiety And fear is really obviously very abusive, and it makes it difficult to kind of think about what your next steps can be because you're always arrested by this moment of terror. One other piece I wanted to say is that when you are dealing with domestic violence, you're often forced to be responsible for things that you can't possibly be responsible for. So, for example, he had a bad day, or he didn't get the promotion, he didn't get the raise, and so somehow you are meant to be responsible for this, and so the anger comes back on you. It's again this sense that everything that happens, this person does not have to take any kind of accountability for, that all of it belongs to you, and everything that belongs to you being punished for unfairly. And I heard some people make some really good comments earlier in the group discussions around what communities can do, what individuals can do. And that's one really important thing: hold people accountable. If there's behavior that's being engaged in, don't just be silent about it. If you hear something happen, say something. So it can't be, she has too much mouth, that's why I had to belt her. That's not ever a good reason to be violent. I'm always struck by this thing. Whenever we hear about murder or something like that in the media, there's always this conversation about we're waiting to hear about what the motive is. We're waiting to understand why. I mean, what would ever be an acceptable reason? Why are we always looking for a motive? The bottom line is that violence under any circumstances is unacceptable and okay. So whether we know the motive or not is irrelevant. The behavior was still inappropriate. The motive is not going to explain anything to us or make the behavior okay or justify it. There was nothing that is justifiable. I did hear somebody too make a comment about, let's stop asking why she stays. That's not really an appropriate question. We don't ask why she stays, and we don't ask what she did, because again, that removes the responsibility for the behavior from the person who is engaging in the behavior to the person who is enduring this behavior, which is again unfair and inappropriate. There are many things that we have control over. We have control over what we think, what we do, how we act. As powerful as we think we are, we don't have control over what other people do or how they think or how they act. And if we think that we have that kind of power, we are deluding ourselves. And I think oftentimes that's where some of the difficulty and confusion comes in for survivors of domestic violence, because we believe if we just do this one thing better, or if we just do this one thing right, that the situation is going to be better. And it's not going to be, because as powerful as we are, as hopeful as we are, we don't have control over somebody else's behavior. And so thinking about leaving, I mean, obviously, the question, again, is inappropriate to ask why she stays, but at the same time, we really want to be able to walk with women and understand why it's not as easy as picking up your keys and leaving an abusive relationship. When you leave, you're leaving your home, really. You're leaving behind not only everything that's bad, but everything that's good. And so that means if you have a window that you look out of and you love the tree outside the window, you're leaving that behind. You know in your home exactly where to reach for all the things that bring you comfort, everything that's familiar. You know your neighbor's there, you have your bed that you sleep in, and it's not bad every day. There are days when your relationship feels good and it feels right, and you're reminded about why you love this person and why you got together with this person in the first place. And so leaving is not as easy as picking up your keys. Leaving is a process. It's a journey. We always say that at the Women's Resource Center. And we really want to be careful as individuals and as agencies not to punish or ostracize women because they decide maybe this is not really the right time. Maybe the money's not there right now. Maybe my children need to finish out the school year, because leaving also means uprooting your children, taking them away from their room, from their things, from their schedule, from their routine. And also, too, as a community, we really want to be careful about not shaming or blaming women, because what can also happen is the whole thing again, if this person doesn't look like a monster to you, then you assume that maybe something's wrong with her. That's not always the case, or ever the case. What may often happen is a woman might say, I noticed that the children and their dad were roughhousing together, they were sharing a laugh, they were playing out in the yard, they enjoy each other so much. And then people might say, how could you do this? How could you take your children away from their father? And that's exactly what we do. We make women feel like the choice to do something for themselves, to get themselves to a place of safety, means that they're doing something against their children, against their religion, against their families. And we have to be able to hold both things. We have to be able to recognize that women can value their vows, can value family, can love their children, and still leave a violent relationship. Do I have any more time? No, sorry. Okay. Wow, that went by fast. Okay. Excuse me.
Thank you so much for the Women's Resource Center for giving that wonderful introduction into the day about the dynamics of domestic violence. Again, my name is Sherry Boston. I am your Solicitor General here in DeKalb County. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for those tuning in at home. Again, we are live tweeting today about everything you see and hear and about the information you're receiving. Please tag me at Sherry Boston SG, and today we are hashtagging SG Says No More. Now let me welcome up Tony Roberts, who will explain temporary protective orders and citizen warrants. Tony is the executive director of the DeKalb County Volunteer Lawyers Foundation and spent many years advocating for domestic violence survivors, including until recently working as a part of my special victims unit team at the Solicitor General's office. But we were absolutely thrilled when DVLF came and plucked her out of our office to head up this wonderful foundation that advocates for domestic violence victims as well as other folks that need legal assistance right here in DeKalb County. Please help me welcome Tony Roberts.
Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me. I really would not have been anywhere else because this cause is really near and dear to my heart, and I am so proud of the work that DeKalb County is doing to address the needs of domestic violence in this community. When I was in high school, I had my first real boyfriend, and you could not tell me a thing. I mean, don't you say one bad word about him or else that was it. He was handsome, very smart, athletic, extremely talented, popular, outgoing. He was the perfect guy. And because he was a few years older than I, life was really exciting with him. He exposed me to a lot of different things and places and experiences, and that led to my first sexual experience. Ladies, if you can remember just a few short years ago, to that time in your lives, you know that those feelings are entirely too much to comprehend for a young person. It is emotionally a very overwhelming time for a young girl. You don't quite know how to process it or what it all means. So as you might imagine, I thought that he hung the moon, I thought he hung the stars, I thought he built the Egyptian pyramids and built Noah's Ark. I mean, you could have bought me for 1/3 of a wooden nickel on layaway. I was done. I was having the time of my life, and he was wonderful, and we spent a lot of time together and with our families, and I was certain that I had met the first and last man that I would fall in love with, because it was love. The way that he would dote on me and see about me and make sure that I was okay, it was cute. And the fact that he always wanted to know where I was and what I was doing, it was proof that he loved me. Some of you know what I'm talking about, right? But as the newness began to wear off, I started seeing his actions in a different light. He became really adamant about knowing my whereabouts, where I was. And he'd want to know who was talking to me at school. He'd want to know who I was going to lunch with. And then he started popping up at my house, unannounced, of course. Shortly thereafter, he was commenting on the clothes that I was wearing to school, asking me, who are you dressing up for? And then it got scary. He pulled a knife on me and a young man from school who had stopped by to bring me a phone cord from Ace Hardware. He pulled a gun on a man riding in the car next to us because that man was flirting with me from his car. I was terrified of him, wanting to get out, but knowing for sure that that just was not an option. It wasn't going to be possible. Then one day he popped up at my house accusing me of going out with someone else. He followed me to a bedroom that I had gone to and confronted me again, and before I knew it, he had slapped me. And then he was chasing me around the room. I tried to push him out of the door, but he had his arm in the crack of the door, and he was using his arm to just swing his fist at me. So I had to make a choice in that moment whether I was going to take that or let him in, and then who knows what was going to happen. And so I just took it, and for those of you who have been in that situation, it seemed like it was happening over such a long period of time, but at slow motion at the same time. So it took a minute before I could even find a voice to scream. And so then I did, and he quickly ran out of the house, and I had the imprint of his hand on my face for the next 4 hours. But what lasted many years beyond that was the terrified feeling of being alone in a world with nobody to protect you, not even from the people who are supposed to love you. It's a feeling that I now know far too many women experience. I went on to live my life in as healthy a fashion as I could muster, and what I learned was to suck it up and put your game face on. Smile and keep your struggles silent. It's the mask that so many women wear. We do it every day because we have no choice. We got to get up, we got to go to work, we got to take care of children and families, and you just stuff it down. And then it'll go away, right? Right. So years passed, and I never experienced a violent relationship again, and but it affected every relationship thereafter. I just had no idea how to let someone in. Neither did I feel safe just being me. I really wasn't sure who that was, to be honest. And what I know now is that if you find yourself in an abusive relationship, there is help available to you. You are worthy of love, real love, the kind that does not hurt, the kind that nurtures, the kind that lifts you up and encourages you and causes you to be your best, not the kind that stifles you and robs you of finding every possible way that there is to let your spirit soar. If you're in anything that's not like that, it's not love, and you deserve better than that. I've got my timer on, so I'm going to obey the rules here. In the last 10 years, I have met some of the most extraordinary women walking around this planet. I have seen and heard stories of women who've endured the unthinkable and yet have risen from the ashes. We are strong and we are resilient, ladies, but you don't have to do it on your own. And you're not alone. There is help available to you. One option is to obtain a civil protective order. This is the process by which you ask the court to order the abuser in your life to cease having any contact with you because either an act of family violence or stalking has occurred. The process for obtaining a protective order in DeKalb County is that you go to the ground floor of the DeKalb courthouse to the Superior Court clerk and let that person know you want to file for a protective order. They'll give you the paperwork to fill out. It specifies what happened and why you need that order. You will then go to the first floor and ring the buzzer next to courtroom 1200C and let that person know you want to see a judge. And you can talk to the judge about what has happened specifically and why you need that order. And the judge will, if the judge grants that order, it's an emergency order that's good for 30 days, that's called an ex parte order, then you will also receive a court date within that 30-day period. You'll take all those documents down to the Superior Court clerk's office, back down there, and there's no fee to file for a protective order. They'll give you a copy that needs to go down to the sheriff's department in the basement level, and then the sheriff, who does an amazing job in DeKalb County, will serve that person, the respondent, the person against whom you want that protective order, and then you will show up for court on the date that you've been given. If you think you need help with that process, please call the Women's Resource Center. They can provide you with some of the very necessary resources that you'll need in order to complete that process. They can assist you with safety planning and counseling and the many other resources. The most dangerous time for a woman in an abusive relationship is when she's trying to leave. That means moms, and children, and entire families die. And when the abuser is trying to prevent her from leaving. So please, please, please make sure that you go through the critical step of obtaining a safety plan, and the Women's Resource Center is amazing in that regard and can help you with that. When you show up to court on that day, if your respondent, that's the person against whom you're trying to get an order, is represented and you are not, there will be someone from my office, the DeKalb Volunteer Lawyers Foundation. There will be an attorney in the room who you can meet with, and if you qualify for our services, there's an income qualification because we're a small organization and we have to sort of create some boundaries around what we can do, but there's an attorney in that office who can help you with that process. If you qualify, then that attorney can represent you right then at that hearing. So please know that we're available to you for that. But what I do know, and what people who do this work know, is that when you're in a situation like this, very often the protective order is just the beginning of your list of legal needs. Our office provides pro bono legal services to indigent residents of DeKalb County in many different areas. Oftentimes, if you're in this situation, you may need a divorce, or you may need assistance with a petition for legitimation, or you need a will, or you have a landlord-tenant issue. So please, we're at our table and we're happy to provide you with some information. If you think you need our services, we want to do all we can to help you. I'm about to go over my time, but I just am really, really honored to be here among such strong and incredible women and men. Where's Suleiman? Because he does an amazing job at what he does. And thank you for all you're doing in the community. It just means so much. I want to thank Solicitor Boston and Chief Assistant Stolarski, Deputy Chief Brown, and the entire Special Victims Unit. I love you all. Oh, this is bad. Not only for putting together, this wonderful, I can't see, and very necessary event each year, but for the work that you and the rest of the service providers in this community do every single day. Thank you. I thought I was going to be able to do it.
As you can see, the DeKalb County Volunteer Lawyers Foundation is well served to be now led by Tony Roberts. She has not only amazing ethic and hard work, but passion. Passion for the work that she is doing. And what I love most about being in this community is seeing folks like Tony, who are survivors, that take those experiences and channel them back in to their everyday lives and look for a way to serve the community. And that's one of the things that Tony Roberts has done. And for that, I thank her, and I thank many people in this room that I know have had domestic violence touch their lives in a way that they say, I want to give back. And it doesn't matter if you are a survivor or a family member of a survivor or a child of a survivor or a friend to a survivor. I think it's clear that we all know that domestic violence touches each and every one of our lives if we're willing to take off the blinders and see that it's everywhere around us. Sometimes it's in our homes, it's in our schools, it's in our workplace, it's in the parking lot of Walmart, Target, or Publix. We've seen it when we're getting out of our car and you hear somebody's voice raised a little bit too high in the parking lot, and you turn to see what's going on, and you see a woman or a child being grabbed by a man or someone, and they kind of give you that look like, this is my business, what are you looking at, right? And it's so easy to turn away and walk in the grocery store and do your shopping for the week because you say to yourself, that's family business, that's not my business. But it's all of our business. Because that young woman or that young child in the parking lot that's being grabbed and put in that car is going home, and we all know what's going to happen when they get home. So we have to do what we can to try to protect them while they're there and while we're seeing it. And we have to do things like remember to say no more. We all play a part of this coordinated community response to domestic violence. We all owe a responsibility. Once again, we are live on DCTV. Thank you so much for getting our message across the county today. Please continue to live tweet. So many of you have been tweeting that I've been responding to. WRC has been tweeting. Georgia Coalition has been tweeting. Marnie Mercer's been tweeting. Thank you so much. And at home, if you hear something, please tweet it out and hashtag SG says no more. Let's trend today to end domestic violence. Next, I want to introduce two of my very favorite people, and two people that I get to work with every day. I want to introduce my Chief Assistant, the Chief Assistant Solicitor General in the Solicitor's Office, Jenny Stolarski, along with Jennifer Waindell, who is the Supervisor for Domestic Violence Cases in the State Court Probation Office. Ginny has focused her career on fighting domestic violence, including serving as the director of the Domestic Violence Project for the Atlanta Volunteer Lawyers Association, and was also previously the Domestic Violence Division Chief at the Solicitor's Office before I appointed her Chief Assistant of the office in 2011. Chief Probation Officer Jennifer Waindell oversees the intensive supervision of domestic violence probationers in DeKalb, in addition to her regular duties as a post instructor who conducts trainings for law enforcement agencies around the state. Ginny and Jennifer, what a dynamic duo they are, have worked hard to create a new protocol on how to remove firearms from defendants who are convicted of domestic violence. Now, I know you're sitting here thinking they're going to talk about it. Well, why do we need a program for that? I mean, it's federal law. It is federal law. But too many times, we know that many of these abusers are still carrying weapons. So, Jenny and Jennifer recently shared this protocol at the Georgia Commission on Family Violence Conference so that other jurisdictions across the state of Georgia could take these ideas back to their jurisdictions and help make their communities safer for survivors. Please help me welcome Jennifer Stolarski, or Jenny Stolarski as I call her, and Jennifer Waindell on domestic violence and firearms protocol.
Good morning. So before we start talking about the protocol, we wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about why this matters, why this is important. An elementary school in Connecticut, a church in Charleston, South Carolina, a movie theater in Louisiana, most recently, a college campus in Oregon. You all know the graphic and tragic images of these very public mass shootings. We all saw the 24-hour news cycles, the pictures of the victims, their family members. And I dare say we all rushed home to our own families to give our children, our loved ones, little tighter hugs those evenings as we heard about these tragedies in these communities, some near, some far away. There was a sense that these occurrences, these mass shootings, were unpredictable, the element of these were just ordinary folks who were living their ordinary lives and just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And like these awful tragedies that they were, in the aftermath, there's terrible sadness, terrible grief, outrage, and national calls for real discussion and strengthening of our gun control laws and for an end to gun violence, right? But as we talk about this issue, there's been little discussion about how domestic violence fits into this larger issue of gun violence and mass shootings. Do y'all realize when we talk about mass shootings, what we're talking about are occurrences where there's a loss of life of 4 or more people? Studies show that when we talk about mass shootings, and the definition is 4 or more people, that 70% of those occurrences occur in private homes, not in public places. 57% involve intimate partners or family members, not strangers. And of that number, 81% of the victims are women and children. When you look at it through that lens, public mass shootings take on a very different light. It's not as unpredictable as what we might think. It's not the stranger on stranger type of crime. And it's certainly not the type of incident that we as a community are unequipped to respond to. Because I can tell you, for those of us who are lining the walls here, who work in the field of domestic violence, what we really are working in is homicide prevention. Because we know that the signs are there. We can tell you what the lethality factors are well in advance of a homicide occurring. On a national scale, we know that women who are killed in intimate partner violence relationships die because of firearms, more than any other type of violence combined, any other method combined. Access to a firearm, in and of itself, just the access to it in a household where domestic violence is occurring, increases the risk of a fatality by 500%. Let that sink in for a second. 500%. The risk increases by. In Georgia, we mirror the national stats. We know that firearms is the leading cause in a domestic violence homicide. Our Georgia Fatality Review Project has found and concluded that there is an urgent and present need for us to use any legal mean possible to remove firearms from the hands of abusers. That we got to get this together. We got to get guns out of the hands of abusers because it's killing our victims. That access alone is a problem, and we've got to do something about it. So what are the legal means? What can we do as a community? Well, Sherry mentioned it. There's a federal law that really can equip us to get these firearms out of the hands of abusers. And there are 3 different scenarios, main scenarios that we can use to get them out. One is through the use of a temporary protective order, as Ms. Roberts was talking about. Federal law says that if you are subject to a family violence temporary protective order, you cannot possess a firearm or ammunition while that protective order is in effect. Second way, if you're a convicted felon, doesn't matter what type of felony it is, then you can't have a firearm or ammunition. It's a lifetime ban, period. If you have a conviction, no guns. And the third way is if you have been convicted of certain types of misdemeanor crimes of domestic violence, then you can't have a gun and you can't have ammunition. That might come as a surprise to some of you. We probably all have heard that if you have a felony conviction, you can't have a firearm. But did you know that if you have a misdemeanor conviction for domestic violence, you can't have a gun? Not a lot of people are aware of that. And we are working really hard in our communities to make sure that particular law gets enforced. And that's where I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer to talk about how here in DeKalb, we're working really hard to make sure that we get guns out of the hands of misdemeanor offenders.
Thank you. Good morning. You may be asking yourself how probation intersects with domestic violence. And in DeKalb County, we're one of 3 counties in the entire state that has a specialized domestic violence unit that I oversee. We have 3 officers that are trained in how to deal with offenders that are convicted of domestic violence, because there's a little bit of a different dynamic as you're kind of hearing today, and also how to work with the victims of that violence. So we try and do a total package scenario to be there to try and rehabilitate the offender and also assist the victim in safety planning, and if they'd like to move on with their lives, do it that way. And over my 10 years of working in domestic violence and specifically in probation, what I kept noticing were our offenders that were arrested with firearms later. It could be pointing the pistol at the victim. It could be firing around in the air. It could be substance abuse issues and having a firearm in the home. And kind of what Jenny said was, we're in the homicide prevention business. So that was a problem that I felt we really needed to answer. And luckily, Jenny in the solicitor's office also felt the same way. So we kind of picked up some groundwork that had been placed about 10 years ago when this issue first started creeping up in DeKalb. And we got some of the different parties to the table, the clerk of state court, the state court judges, the probation department, the Solicitor-General's department, and we kind of sat down and looked at how we could do this. And it's a very unique program, and we're hoping, and that's why we do trainings around Georgia, that we can kind of get this to catch on, because what we do is when the offender takes the plea in court, we have them sign a document, similar to what magistrate court does. You heard about the temporary protective orders. I'd also like to congratulate the magistrate court. They also enforce that firearms ban, and they work closely with the sheriff's department to turn those weapons in while those protective orders are going on. But when our offenders take their plea, or they're found guilty in a trial, they have a document that they have to read and sign the day that they take their plea, saying, yes, I own a firearm, this is what it looks like, this is the serial number, this is how many rounds of ammunition I have, how many magazines that hold the ammunition, and my carried concealed permit. So they let us know that up front. We notify them that they have 24 hours to turn it into us. We take custody of those, and once the case expires, then we would destroy those weapons, and there's a protocol in place to do that. The second option is, yes, I owned a firearm or ammunition within the last 6 months. I sold it to a pawn shop, I gave it to my cousin, I gave it to my uncle, and then we bring those parties in to swear that they actually took custody of that, because having custody of the firearm doesn't mean actually holding it. It could be in your possession, in your home, in the glove box of your car, any access to that firearm. And the third option is, no, I've never owned any ammunition or any firearms, and sometimes people check that box, but they're not actually being truthful. And we'll come into contact with those firearms, either doing field home checks, or maybe the person is arrested later for a new offense with that firearm, but they've sworn on this document to the court and to probation that, no, I don't have these things. And we let them know up front the federal penalties, the years of imprisonment they might be facing, the federal fine. And so they're aware of all those things when they sign that document. And if we do catch them with that, or law enforcement responding to a new scene of domestic violence catches them with that, then we have a protocol in place to bring that to the judge's attention, and the judges are taking this seriously, and they're potentially revoking the probationers based on that information, because they're just as concerned for the victim's safety as the probation department is in the Solicitor General's office. So that's kind of how it came to be, and we're hoping that it catches in the rest of Georgia, because the federal law is something we do need to enforce on this misdemeanor level. Thank you very much.
And I'll just say in closing, this protocol came about because we were trying to find a workaround, because Georgia does not currently have a state parallel law to the federal law. So it makes it a little difficult to enforce the federal law. So this was a creative way to make sure that we were paying respect to the intent of the federal law in a way that we were able to actually accomplish what the federal law wants to have happen. But I would encourage folks, if you think this is an important issue, that you learn about it. The Fatality Review Project report is online. If you go to the Georgia Commission on Family Violence, you can read about it. There's a specific section on firearms and domestic violence. This is an issue that we think is very important. We think your legislature should know about how important it is to you if you share the opinion. We certainly would love to see Georgia have its own specific law that addresses this issue.
please thank Jenny and Jennifer for all the hard work that they do in our DV work, in our community. We are about to take a 10-minute break, but before we do, I just want to remind everyone, if you've come in and you checked in at our front table, you would have gotten a sheet that gave you 5 questions today. That is our challenge for you, is to get the answers to those 5 questions, and you can get all those answers by visiting all of our resource tables today. If you visit with our resource tables, you should be able to answer those questions, and at the end of the day, we're going to be giving out a few door prizes to those that get all 5 questions answered correctly. So we're going to take a 10-minute break. For those of you at home, again, please, thank you for tuning in. We're not done yet. We'll be coming back in 10 minutes. Please, hashtag SG says no more at Sherry Boston SG, and we will take a 10-minute break, and when we come back, we're going to hear from Detective Sergeant Marnie Mercer on how to investigate DV crimes. Thank you very much. County, we have had a wonderful morning. Again, thank you to DCTV, and thank you to those at home that are seeing this message either live or in our rebroadcast. We are live tweeting today, so if you're in the room or at home and you want to tweet out a message, please tag me at Sherry Boston SG. And today's hashtag for this event is SG Says No More. And we are staying on time this morning. I'd like to introduce one of my very favorite people, Detective Sergeant Marnie Mercer of the Special Victims Unit with DeKalb County Police Department. Marnie's one of the first people that I got to meet when I became Solicitor General. I met her and I met Jay Eisner, and they were 2 wonderful people that were doing the great police work when it came to domestic violence here in DeKalb. And I was truly in awe of the work that they were doing. And here we are 5 years later, and I am so grateful to have their partnership. I'm grateful to have them a part of my DeKalb County team. And I just want to thank them for the work that they do every day. Marnie is going to explain what it's like to investigate domestic violence cases. And she has been a DeKalb County police officer since 2003 and has worked as a domestic violence detective and as a supervisor of the domestic violence unit. So please help me welcome Detective Sergeant Marnie Mercer of the DeKalb County Police Department.
Good morning, everyone. So I have the interactive portion of the routine this morning, so if everyone can just warm up their hands a little bit. Right? What I need for you to do is I am going to read a list of zip codes. And if you hear the zip code that you live in or that you work in, I would like you to raise your hand. And I would like you to keep your hand raised until I am done reading zip codes. All right? So 30345, 30340, 30032, 30084, 30034, 30035, 30038, 30058, 30083, 30030, 30088, 30021, 30294, 30087, 30316. Everybody who has raised their hand, raise them up really high. Okay, now everybody look around. These represent the zip codes that DeKalb County police officers respond to in a single day of domestic violence police response. One day. These communities have names too: Atlanta, Decatur, Stone Mountain, Lithonia, Clarkston, Ellenwood, Tucker, and 2, Brookhaven, Dunwoody, Chambly, Doraville, Avondale Estates. There are communities. They're where we live and work, and no part of DeKalb County is untouched by domestic violence response. So as Sherry said, I have been a police officer since 2003. More importantly, I have worked as a domestic violence detective now for almost 10 years. January 1st, 2016 will mark the end of my 10th year as a domestic violence detective. The domestic violence unit in DeKalb County was started on January 1st, 2006, and I was one of the first members of that unit. So as a supervisor of the domestic violence unit, I've become kind of a numbers person because my supervisors are constantly asking me for them. So I can say that in my 10 years as a domestic violence detective, we have had over 70,000 domestic violence police reports in DeKalb County. We have had over 200,000 911 domestic violence police calls in DeKalb County, and over 15,000 domestic violence arrests in DeKalb County since 2006. This is my 5th year speaking, so I decided to conduct a highly scientific poll on Facebook and ask people, well, what would you like to hear about the domestic violence, about law enforcement response to domestic violence? And I had a little bit of trepidation when I did that because I was worried that people might say, well, why do police always get it wrong? Or why are police officers so mean? Or why don't you arrest more people? Or why don't you arrest fewer people? Or something along those lines. But a friend and mentor of mine saved me, as she does often. And she said, tell them about your unit. Tell them about what you do to help people. So that I can do. The domestic violence unit in DeKalb County, there she is too, has 4 detectives and 1 sergeant. And between those 5 people, that represents over 60 years of police experience in DeKalb County. Each year, there are over 25,000 domestic violence 911 calls, over 8,000 police reports, and over 2,000 arrests that I have to weed through in order to decide what to assign to those 4 domestic violence detectives. This year, those 4 detectives have worked over 570 domestic violence cases, including over 200 aggravated assaults. They have participated in developing strangulation training for the entire DeKalb County Police Department, which we implemented in 2015. They are participating in a countywide grant to address domestic violence in persons over the ages of 50. Domestic violence looks different to my detective every day that they come to work. It is, of course, intimate partner violence, but it is also stalking, it's child abuse, it's elder abuse, it's sexual violence. We've also covered how it happens in every community already. I want to give you a little bit about some of the cases that my detectives have investigated this year so that you know the kinds of things that they see every day. They investigated a man who used strangulation to keep not only his wife, but also his mother in terror. Despite multiple independent family witnesses to multiple incidents, nobody reported the abuse until it was called in by a neighbor to be investigated by detectives. They investigated a man who forced his victim to marry him in the belief that she would then not have to testify against him. No longer true. When she threatened to call the police, he threatened to kill her dog. And once he was arrested, he called her hundreds of times from the jail to instruct her on what to say when she had to come to court. They investigated the case of an immigrant child who was so frightened by her abuser, it took her over a month in defects custody to finally feel comfortable saying what had happened to her. They investigated the case of a 14-year-old child who was removed from the hotel room where she lived with her mom, her stepfather, and her 5 brothers and sisters. When she was removed, this 14-year-old child weighed 53 pounds. And just last week, they investigated and shut down a personal care home where the live-in caretaker systematically exploited and abused the 5 to 8 elderly and disabled persons who lived in that home with them. Each of these cases is being prosecuted because of the work of the detectives in my unit, because they refused to give up, and because they were able to work with other agencies. Those same detectives in my unit on more than 4 occasions this year have pooled their money to put victims up in a hotel room when they didn't have immediate access to shelter. They have bought food, diapers, formula, and clothing for victims of domestic violence, and they have participated in clothing and toiletry drives for local shelters in order to help survivors in their community. They work tirelessly for survivors of domestic violence, even if those survivors are unable to do anything for themselves. And I'm really proud of them. So I want to say, though, the best part about working in DeKalb, the best part about these detectives is that we don't do this work alone, ever. I highlighted those 5 specific cases because each of those cases represented a time where a detective had to reach out to someone else in DeKalb County, someone else in our system, and get their assistance with that investigation or help for that victim. We have built a coordinated community response in DeKalb County that we should be really proud of. That is one of the top in the state. And it is my favorite thing about being a DeKalb County detective. We work with the solicitor's office, we work with the district attorney's office, we work with the sheriff's office, we work with probation, we work with judges, and we work with nonprofits every day in order to give the best possible service to victims of domestic violence or to survivors of domestic violence. There's always room to improve, of course, and we are even now developing programs to look specifically at offenders and hold them accountable for their behavior, things that we hope to roll out within the next year. As Sherry mentioned earlier, we of course hope that domestic violence will stop one day. So I will close with this. I hope that I do not see any of you again next year.
Thank you so much to Detective Sergeant Marnie Mercer for all the great work that you do, and of course, always being a wonderful partner in domestic violence in DeKalb County. Let's give her another round of applause. So we have a few extra minutes. I'm going to deviate from the program for just a second and introduce to you a member of our DeKalb County family. Judge J.P. Boulay is one of our DeKalb County Superior Court judges, and I want to give him an opportunity just to speak to you for just a moment. But we couldn't do all the work that we do here in DeKalb without judges that recognize the need for those temporary protective orders, with judges that are willing to hold offenders accountable. And I'm glad that we have Judge J.P. Boulay. Again, at home, thank you for tuning in. We're hashtagging today at Sherry Boston SG. SG says no more. Let me introduce Judge J.P. Boulay.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity just to say a few quick words. Again, I'm J.P. Boulay of DeKalb County Superior Court. My very first job was actually under the Third Year Practice Act as a law student in the solicitor's office in Athens, Clarke County. And one thing that affected me so much in that period was the cycle of abuse that I know everyone that works in this field knows a lot about. And how do you break that cycle of abuse? And I was here earlier this morning. I had court at 9, and I'm going back to court here in a few minutes. But I was here earlier this morning, and I walked around the tables to see everyone who is here and part of trying to solve this problem. And I was really inspired by it because, you know, hopefully there's never a first time for domestic violence. But because of Solicitor Sherry Boston and everyone who's here today, and I met even the folks that have the organization that helps out pets that are victimized by all this. So I didn't know that even existed until today. And I really do think that all of you are a part of breaking that cycle of abuse. And I'm so very fortunate to be a judge in DeKalb County, where we have so many people who do care about this issue and are taking steps to solve it and make things better. So thanks to all of you. Solicitor Boston, thank you for having me and putting this together. Again, I'm Judge J.P. Boulay, DeKalb County Superior Court. Thank you.
So now we're moving into the part of the program where I'm going to take a minute to tell you about how we prosecute DV cases here in DeKalb County. Once again, it is my honor and my privilege to be your Solicitor General, and I have been your Solicitor General for almost 5 years, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to serve you and to serve the citizens of DeKalb County. And I want to take this time to explain to you a little bit about the work we do. We handle a lot of cases here in DeKalb, but we're here today to talk about domestic violence and the work that we do in the Solicitor General's office every day to help eradicate domestic violence. So how we're a part of this collaborative process that we heard today is that we prosecute domestic violence cases. And it's exactly why we're doing this symposium today. As I stated, we handle about 13,000 criminal cases every single year, and about 3,500 of those cases are domestic violence cases. They come in every shape, form, or fashion. And let me just start off by saying is that every case that comes into our office, it comes because it has been labeled as a misdemeanor domestic violence case. That means someone has been charged with a misdemeanor. But for us, it does not stop there. We don't assume because we have a case where someone's been charged with a misdemeanor that that is the end of the story. I am privileged and blessed to have an amazing team of people. And once again, what I'm going to do is, if you work in the Solicitor General's office, I mean anybody, please stand. I'd like to recognize you for all the hard work that you do every day. Thank you. So when these cases come into our office, they immediately go to our Special Victims Unit. That unit touches every single domestic violence related case in our office. We touch every case. And from there, we make victim contact. We reach out to every victim on every case. And we make determinations, because sometimes when our police arrive on scene, they may not get the full story. Not because they're not trying to get the full story, but because a victim may not feel in that moment, as their abuser often is sitting within earshot of the incident, to tell what's truly going on. So although our police officer may arrest someone for misdemeanor family violence battery, oftentimes when we get these cases and we start digging and asking questions, looking up past reports of calls that have gone to this home, looking up past situations with this defendant's name, we find that there may be more to the story. And we dig and we dig and we dig to see if there is more. Because if we can make a felony charge out of that misdemeanor domestic violence case, we do that. We do that every day, because for us, it's about saving victims. It's about holding offenders accountable. And the law is strong if we can use it. And the law makes a second family violence battery conviction a felony. It says if someone has been convicted prior for family violence battery, it doesn't have to be the same victim, that we can then charge that offender with a felony. And that's what we aim to do if the evidence is there to do so. We want to turn that work over to the district attorney's office and say, now it's your job to step in and prosecute this as a felony. And that's the work we do every day. We have to put that package together. We have to make sure it has all the information they need. And that's what we do. Our investigators, I'm proud of our investigative unit in our office. I'm proud to say that every investigator that works in our Special Victims Unit have previously worked not only as law enforcement, but previously worked in district attorney's offices and homicide units. Because as Ms. Stolarski said earlier, DVs are just murders waiting to happen. So we look at every case that comes through our office as preventing murders. That's how seriously we take domestic violence. And I'm proud to say that we have lawyers and investigators and victim witness advocates who help get services and work closely with victims every day, because we know that we can stop a murder before it happens. We know that we can be a part of the coordinated community response. And every time we have a case that's been successful, and by successful, I mean we feel like we have helped a victim out of a horrible situation. Because we know that when we get information about domestic violence cases, that there are other people in that home that potentially are being abused. There are children. There are disabled adults. There are often mothers and fathers. And we work really hard to make sure that we can protect those people, because they're looking to us even when they can't speak for themselves. Oftentimes when they won't speak for themselves for fear of the situation that they're in. We had a case recently that came to our office as a misdemeanor. But the folks in my office, my investigators, my advocates, my lawyers said something's not right here. And as of a result of a case that started out as a misdemeanor family violence situation, ultimately we discovered that this man was not only abusing her, but her children as well, both physically and sexually. We investigated that case. We put together an amazing case. We interviewed. We worked the case. We sent it to the DA's office, and that man was just sentenced to 80 years. And I tell you about that not because I want to pat myself on the back, because I tell you about that because we help save lives. And the important thing about that is, and we always say in our office, that misdemeanors do matter, because that came in as a misdemeanor case. But we look at all of our cases to say, what else is going on here? And how can we be a part of the solution? And how can we help victims? And that's really what we do. We prosecute cases, we hold offenders accountable, but at the end of the day, the real work is helping victims. A couple of years ago, right here in this very room at this symposium, a victim walked in here with no place to go. She had fled an abusive relationship from another state, actually, with her 2 children, including a baby. And she was watching right here on DCTV. I think it was the first year that we went live. And she saw what we were doing. And she thought to herself, I've been trying to find help. And she walked into the back of that room towards the end of the symposium with her baby in her arms and asked for help. When she got here, one of our advocates right here in this room was able to put her in touch with one of our partners, the Women's Resource Center, so that we could get her help and shelter for her children. The Women's Resource Center put her in their safe house, helped her get her life together, and now 2 years later, not only is she doing better, she has now become a spokesperson helping others to get out of abusive relationships. Just a few days ago at the Women's Resources annual Candlelight Vigil, we watched her share her story. And when she got up on that stage to share her story, as every year that WRC allows a survivor to share that story, that's when we recognized her. And we said, that's the woman that came into our symposium asking for help. And not only was she able to share her story publicly out in the gazebo here in DeKalb County, she also shared her story on a national level when she was featured in a documentary that was just filmed last year with the folks at WRC in the Safe House talking about domestic violence. And so it's truly an amazing thing. And I guess what I want to say and reminder as we're talking today, as we are being seen by folks around the county, as this airs live right now, and as it continues to replay, I hope, over and over and over again, not just this month, but throughout the year. And for those folks in the administration that are watching this right now, I would ask you, put this on a loop 365 days until we film the next one next year. Because every day, we're going to reach a victim. Every day, there's going to be a victim that flips on his or her television, sees just a snippet of what we're talking about here today, and has a place to go to get help. And because we're doing this, we touch so many victims. And to learn that the victim that walked through those doors because she saw us on TV and said, I got to get over there because I know there are people in that room that can help me, is truly amazing, and to me is a testament of all the good work that every person in this room that's committed to domestic violence every day does. We just want to help and serve. And her story now gives hope, and that's what we want to do here today. We all personally understand the dangers of domestic violence and how it can tear families apart. We've talked about what we know. We've talked about the people we know. And some of you know, several years ago, I shared the story of my grandmother, who's 91 years old and suffered at the hands of domestic violence when she was young. And how earlier today, I spoke with a woman who came and she had to leave. She's a senior. And she told me that the reason she was here today is because she was doing her laundry yesterday and she saw our ad in the paper while she was doing her laundry. And she said to me, you know, I'm a survivor of domestic violence when I was young. But when I was young, they didn't have anybody out there to help you. They didn't have organizations like this. So I didn't know where to turn. But then she said something else to me. She said, but the problem now is there's lots of great organizations and there's so much violence in the world. That was interesting what she said to me. And it does remind me of what I shared with you many years ago about my grandmother. And the only way for her to leave her domestic violence relationship when she was pregnant with my mother was to leave her 4 children behind. Because there was no shelter that a young woman in her early 20s with 3 children and pregnant with her 4th and not even a 4th grade education could go to get help. Her coordinated community response was my great-grandmother, Lucy, who begged her to go and said, I will take care of the children, but if you don't leave, he will kill you. And she was talking about her brother, who she knew would kill her if she stayed. That was the coordinated community response, and my grandmother was grateful to have that in her life. And I'm grateful now that I can stand in this room and listen and see all of you who do that work, who would have been there or are there for women like my grandmother, who is the main reason I'm standing here. Because my mother, who again, my grandmother was being abused when she was pregnant with my mother, may not have made it had my grandfather succeeded in the threats that he carried out on her every day. I wouldn't be able to stand here and advocate for domestic violence victims every day. And for that, I am grateful. I am grateful for the people that helped her, and I'm grateful for the work that we get to do every day. And I'm grateful that people like you are here listening to this message. But it means we have to turn around and give back. So in order to change lives, we need your help. Far often our cases don't have the evidence that we need that's required to move on in a court of law. That is the big struggle. So we need you as family, friends, and neighbors who see domestic violence happening to first believe a victim when they make an outcry and don't turn a blind eye to what you're observing. Too many times after a domestic violence fatality, and we've talked about it, and Mr. Larsky and Jennifer Wayne-Dell talked about it, about mass shootings and what it really means and what it really looks like. Too many times it's only after these things happen that we're connecting the dots, that we're saying, oh yeah, I saw this and that didn't make sense. Oh yeah, I saw that and that always made me feel funny. Let's connect the dots sooner. Let's not wait to talk about it when it becomes a tragedy on the front page news. Help victims connect with emergency and support services. Give them what they need. Be there for them. Help them seek guidance from professionals like the folks in this room. But understand that the situation they're facing is the most dangerous situation that they are in their lives. Because once a victim decides to leave an abusive relationship, that becomes the most dangerous day in that relationship. And it can't be done lightly. It has to be done with a safety plan. Without a safety plan, she is likely to be murdered. Keep that in mind. Let the victim know you'll always be there for her, no matter what, even if today is not the day that she's going to leave. Don't get frustrated if the process takes longer than you feel like it should take, because it's not about you and your comfort level. It's about them and their family and their children. And there's so much to consider when you walk out the door with just your children in your arms and the clothes that you have on your back and potentially nothing else. Take pictures if you can. We all have camera phones. Be there. Be willing to testify if necessary. Work with prosecutors. Don't be afraid to be a witness. She or he may be afraid, but you don't have to be afraid. You can be their voice when sometimes they can't be the voice for themselves. Those are the things we need to prosecute these cases, because oftentimes there are no other witnesses. So if you see or hear anything, it can become very useful. Thank you for coming here today, and thank you for being a part of the process. It is my honor and pleasure to serve as your Solicitor General and to make this a part of my everyday mission. It is the best work that I get to do. And for that, I am grateful. Before we move on to our next speaker, I spy our interim CEO in the back of the room, Lee May. I'd like to welcome him up to say a few words. Our CEO has always been a champion of domestic violence prevention, and he pops into our symposium every year, and he's the man that I'm going to ask to commit to put our video, this symposium that's live right now, on a loop, not just in the month of October, but all year long. Can I get an amen from in the room? Please help me welcome our interim CEO, Lee May.
She know how to put somebody on the spot, right? So let me just start by saying it's done, okay? It'll be on a running loop. It will be on a running loop. So yes, this is running live, and we are excited to host this, the facility, I would say, and making sure that this conversation really continues to reverberate in our communities and that people are educated about this being a real issue. And every time I come through here, I try and stop and read materials to really understand kind of the impact that this has on lives, the fact that just about all of us have been impacted by this deadly issue. And I'm just thankful that we have a great Solicitor General in Sherry Boston. She is a phenomenal Solicitor General. And I'll say that to the rooftop. She's a good friend and just, you know what, a good person that really wants to do the right thing. I mean, this really isn't in her scope of work or services as solicitor, but she's taken it on because she understands the impact that it has on our county. And I just think the theme for this gathering here, building bridges, making connections, coordinating a community response to domestic violence, I think is apropos, because the one thing that I say as government is that we cannot do it alone. It really takes a coordinated community effort to attack any issue that we see before us. And by you all being here today, you all have pledged your support and your commitment and your investment in eradicating this deadly issue that has plagued not just our county, but this nation. I mean, just reading the names of people, remembering the names, is something that is challenging for me, just looking to say that these are people who have been committed. And my belief is these are people who have died as a result of domestic violence. And that should say something to all of us, that we have to do something. So again, my commitment, we will continue to roll this moving forward, but we absolutely support you, Sherry, and your work, and anything that we can continue to do to add value from a county government state, we will continue to do that. So God bless you all. Thank you all for coming out.
So that we stay on time with our program, and we are just a few minutes behind, but we're good. Next, I want to introduce Allison Smith-Burke, who is the Director of Public Policy with the Georgia Coalition Against Domestic Violence, and she's going to talk about violence in the workplace. Again, if you're at home watching, thank you so much for tuning in on DCTV today, and we are live tweeting this event. Please send out the information. Let's get Twitter trending here in DeKalb today. SG says no more. Also at Sherry Boston SG. Let's give a warm welcome to our partner and our friend, Allison Smith-Burke.
Thank you so much to the DeKalb SG's office for allowing us to be here and talk about this really important issue. And we know that it impacts all of Georgia, but it impacts us right here at home here in DeKalb County. And most of you probably know someone who's been a victim of domestic violence, whether or not they told you they were a victim. So I'm hoping that what I can share with you will help you to recognize the signs specifically in the workplace so that you will know how to respond. There's a lot of information about this topic that we as a state coalition proffer. If you are a business owner, and you can contact us. If you get in touch with the SG's office, they can put you in touch with us. But we know that just like domestic violence impacts communities and homes, it impacts businesses. We know that the annual cost of domestic violence to the U.S. economy is about $8 billion a year. So we're talking about lost productivity, we're talking about absences, both on the part of the person being abused and the person who is using abuse, right? They're using company time in order to stalk a victim, in order to track a victim. We also know that about 74% of abused, battered women report being harassed at work by their intimate partner. So what it can look like are, upsetting texts, upsetting phone calls, drop-ins to see if she's there. And then you may also see evidence of the abuse that's happening at home, where this person may be disabling their car or taking away their car keys so they can't get to work, or causing injuries that make them not presentable at work. keeping them up late at night so that they're not as productive. And it's so important that employers understand this issue so that they can deal with it correctly, because the absolute worst way to deal with it is to fire an employee, because the economic security of a victim, like the ability of a victim to earn a wage, can make the difference between life and death. We know via a nationwide study that 74% of victims in shelter say that they stayed longer in the abusive relationship because they didn't know how they were going to support themselves financially. It is the big issue. When we ask why do victims stay, it is because of money. That is often the number one issue, if not the number two issue, because let's just face it, it is really hard to support yourself. So if you're taking away that employment, you are taking away that possible ticket to safety. So it's really important that workplaces really understand the signs and respond appropriately. So there's, like I said, a lot of resources on this, and if you contact us at GCADV, that's Georgia Coalition Against Domestic Violence, you Google that, you can get in touch with us, and we can send you, if you're an employer, we can send you a toolkit that will help you, and some other resources to help you understand how to respond on the workplace. I mean, the biggest way that you can help communicate that you are that you want to work with an employee as opposed to fire them is to post posters in your bathrooms with the domestic violence statewide hotline. That signals to an employee that, hey, my employer maybe understands what I'm going through and may be open to me talking with them about it. It's really important to connect with your local domestic violence programs. DeKalb County is particularly fortunate in that it has many really, really good local nonprofits. And I hesitate to mention a couple of them because I won't mention all of them, but we have 2 domestic violence shelters. We have community-based programs. Get in touch with those folks. Invite them to your office. Get to know them. Get to know the kinds of services that they offer so that when someone comes to you and feels free enough to tell you as your employee that, hey, I'm having some stuff going on at home that's really making it hard for me to be productive here, that you'll know, well, hey, I know so-and-so at Women's Resource Center. I know so-and-so at International Women's House, and they do so many things, and not just shelter, but they do all these other important things that may help you. So I think those are the biggest things that can help. If you have an employee newsletter, if you want to have just a highlight about domestic violence in there, that could be done during Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Examine some of your security issues around your office. So if you've got a victim that comes forward and really needs help in navigating the work environment in the context of what's going on at home, you'll want to maybe have a photo of the person who's abusing them, particularly if this person has left the abuse. That way you'll know when this person shows up at your office. There are also some other options that you have legally in terms of getting a protective order for your business. But it's just really important to talk with the victim about it and be open to it, because your employees are your best asset. And the more that you can help improve what's going on with them in their lives, I think the more productive that they are for you. Again, I don't want to go on and on because I know we're a little behind, but please, if you're an employer, please reach out to us at gcadv.org. And we can equip you with some information about how to structure your workplace and create policies that really help victims. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much to Allison for giving that information about workplace. As you heard earlier today, and as we've talked about, the workplace can be a dangerous situation for not only a victim, but for the folks that work in that environment. Often our offenders, if our survivor has done what they need to do and hidden where they are, sometimes work is the place they know they can go to find them. And many of the shootings and fatalities that we've heard about in places all over the country are because that is where an offender is going to murder their victim. And in doing so, have no regard for all the other folks that ultimately will be injured and murdered in that situation. So protecting our workplace and understanding how we can make work a safe haven for victims is very important. Next up, I want to introduce our partner and our friend, Aparna Bhattacharya. She is the executive director of Raksha, a nonprofit that promotes a stronger South Asian community. Her honors include being named a champion of change at the White House. I love saying that every time. Can we give her a round of applause for that? There are very few people that get the honor of being honored by a president, and I'm so happy to say that Aparna is one of those people for the very work that she does for our community here in DeKalb every day. She also serves on the board of the Georgia Coalition Against Domestic Violence and the National Immigrant Women's Advocacy Project. And she's here to talk about domestic violence in the immigrant and refugee community. As those of you know that are in this room and watching at home, DeKalb County is home to 158 different languages. We are a very diverse community. And our community is a home for many refugees from many different countries. They come and are placed right here in DeKalb County. And so therefore, we want to make sure that we are not leaving out any segment of our population when it comes to advocacy and helping victims. And that's where people like Aparna come in. So please help me welcome Aparna.
Good morning. So I've had the pleasure of being here, I think, all 5 years, and I've had the opportunity to speak all 5 years. And it's always an honor to be here. I love this event. I love that we have leadership in DeKalb County that supports recognizing domestic violence awareness in October. So thank you, Sherry. Thank you to your entire office for making this a priority and doing this every year. It shows really strong leadership in ending domestic violence in our communities. The other thing I'm really proud of is the fact that I was born and raised in DeKalb County. I'm a product of DeKalb County. So this county is really important to me, and how we do our work is really important to me. And then those partnerships that continue to support this work is really important. Now, you've heard how diverse DeKalb County is. So that means our work is a little bit different. Part of my role as a director of Raksha is to also conduct training on cultural competency, cultural relevancy, making sure that the services are accessible to folks who might be new to the country or might have been here for many years but didn't feel comfortable accessing those services. And it's always an interesting dialogue, because here are things that I hear when I do trainings on culture is, well, it's part of their culture. So we may have some officers in other counties. I'm not going to say DeKalb County because Marnie's so good to always call and check in. But we've had stories throughout the state of Georgia where an officer won't make arrest because of the statement, well, it's part of their culture. Or an arrest wasn't made a few days ago just because the in-laws were citing on the side of their son. And so an arrest wasn't made when a woman and her daughter was injured in another county that we were working with yesterday. Or we have programs that won't provide interpreters for clients so that they can access their life-saving services. And that's a challenge that we're fighting for, not just for the South Asian community, but for all refugee and immigrant communities, to make sure they have the same access to safety and healing and empowerment that everyone has. But it's still a challenge in this county. Not county, it's still a challenge in this community overall. it's hard to come forward because there are concepts and ideas about whether, if I call the police, will I be turned into immigration? And that is a constant fear for survivors to come forward. Even if they're legally here and have status, they're still scared to call the police because it could have an impact on their immigration status if they're arrested. Abusers will tell them, well, I'll just have you arrested. You don't speak English. You'll have your children taken away. And since you're not a citizen, you're not going to get the child. And that is what a lot of survivors hear. So they're scared. We've had clients who are scared to tell us their immigration status, even when we want to connect them to services. I don't know how much you know about immigration and refugees, but immigration status is one way in which violence plays out. Threats to not file the right paperwork, threats to have you deported, threats to take the children away to another country. That's one of the many ways in which what immigrant survivors face. And so that's a real fear, because if a child gets taken away to another country and kidnapped, depending on the country, the other country may not recognize the custody laws of the United States. So we have to do some serious safety planning and some serious work to prevent that from happening, which means we have to be aware, we have to be vigilant, and we have to keep having those conversations and asking questions. With immigration, there's immigration relief for a lot of survivors, whether you have documentation or not. And a lot of people, well, you're legal here. It shouldn't be a challenge if you have legal status. But the reality is there are some survivors who are on dependent statuses. So let's say you're a student or you're a spouse of a student. You can't work. So if you're fleeing a domestic violence situation, how do you support yourself? You might get a few months in the shelter, but beyond that, when you file for immigration status, it can take almost a year to get that status. And how do you support yourself in that time? It makes you more vulnerable to other victimizations. Luckily, we have some shelters that will make those exceptions and let survivors stay, but we have some that don't. And so we have survivors who end up in other situations where they're being victimized yet again. So it's something to keep in mind of, like, when we hear negative stuff about immigration and we hear these laws that say we don't want certain individuals with certain status to have driver's license, well, that impacts survivors of domestic violence who are waiting for their immigration relief. How do you support yourself? How do you take care of your kids if you can't drive a car? And if you live in a county where there's no public transportation, how do you support yourself? So we really have to be careful in really making sure that the impact of the laws that we pass don't prevent other survivors from having access to safety, empowerment, and all the other things that they need to heal, because even accessing services can be difficult depending on where they have to go. In talking about immigration, there's many different reliefs for individuals who are here. And if you ever have a question about immigration, I can tell you what relief is available, but the reality is you'll have to talk to an immigration attorney to make sure that that individual has access to that relief, because there's certain factors that you have to keep in mind. So Jennifer is back there from Latin American Association. She's waving her hand. But you can call organizations like Latin American Association, Catholic Charities, or the Georgia Asylum and Immigration Network to connect survivors to immigration relief so that they can try and find out if they're eligible for certain services, so they don't have to live in fear of immigration status and their abuser controlling that. So please keep that in mind as you're working with individuals, or if you're seeking help, that if immigration is a threat, to ask those questions and call one of our partners. We have lots of folks representing immigrant and refugee organizations like Tapestry, International Women's House, Their Familia, Caminar Latino. So there's a few of us out there that are doing a lot of work with refugee and immigrant communities. So you can connect to one of us, and we can also connect you to the immigration attorneys to find out. There's a fear of police, and even though we have amazing officers like Marnie who take away so many who take away so many barriers, there's still that fear because you may have had a bad experience in your home country where officers might be bribed, where the abuser could influence the officer. So that makes it very difficult for many survivors to come forward and seek help because they just don't know. And then with the media, what we're seeing every day about police officers, it makes it even harder for survivors to feel comfortable in any community. But just know that there are great officers out there, and if you reach out to them, that they will they will make a huge difference in your lives. I remember the story of taking one of my coworkers to an interview that Marnie had with one of our clients, and I think her whole view of law enforcement just changed in that one moment. So, Detective Mercer, you do a great job, and you make a huge difference, and you've changed the perceptions of a lot of people and their views of law enforcement just by the way you do things. Knowing that folks need access to culturally and linguistically specific therapy and counseling. We all need to have the opportunity to heal and be able to tell our story in our own language without having to explain our religions or kind of defend our religions and our cultures, but to do it in a way where you see us and support us for our reality and help us find our own strength. We need to have ways that individuals can support themselves. A lot of the individuals we've worked with may not have worked in their home country. They may have had a third grade education. So being able to get the support so they can build their ability to support themselves and have access to education is an important part of our work. A lot of times they're isolated. And I think those are the big ones. Access to language, knowing your immigration, not being isolated, being able to be connected to community, and having a community that's going to support you regardless of what choice you make. One of the things that we've heard many survivors say is that when they make that choice to leave the abusive situation, they lose a part of their community. These individuals are already separated by thousands and thousands of miles from their family, and their pseudo-family here is what they're about to lose when they take that step to leave. So it's a very difficult decision, and so we have to provide support. So as a community, we need to learn how to be supportive to those survivors when they're making that, and how do we create another family of support and love so survivors can make the choices that are good for them when they're ready. We need to talk to our youth about these topics. We need to make time to have those tough conversations. We did some focus groups with some youth in our community, and 2 out of 8 said they would tell their parents if they were in an abusive situation. But that other 6 did not feel safe talking to their parents because they were afraid they would be blamed. Their parents don't talk to them about dating. That's not what you do. So if you're in a violent relationship, are you going to come forward and tell your parents, oh, I've been doing something you don't want me to do, and I'm also being hurt? So a lot of times the youth will suffer in silence and not get the support that they need to heal and move on. I think that's the best. I think for survivors that are out there, know that you're not alone. It's not part of our culture. It's not part of our religion. Folks will just say that to justify their actions, but the reality is none of our religions believe in violence, believe in hurting individuals. They want us to grow strong, and our religion should be to help us be the best that we can be and not to keep us encaged in a very unhealthy environment. So those are the important things that I want to get out there. I want folks to feel comfortable at least calling and finding out what the resources are. Even if you're scared, you don't have to leave right away. Leave when you're comfortable. It's your decision to make, but just find out what resources are there for you. Find out what your rights are. Ask for an interpreter if you need it. You have a right to it. We're supposed to be providing it. So if a program refuses to get it, you keep advocating for yourself and ask for that interpreter because it is available. And our federal laws state that we have to have access to interpreters when we're seeking life-threatening or life-saving services. So please advocate for yourselves, ask for it, and if you're in the community, help advocate for someone you know who might need these services. Thank you so much.
It looks like we are running a few minutes behind. We're going to take just a short 5-minute break. But before we do that, I just want to say this about Aparna and the amazing work that all of our nonprofit organizations do for those that are here either as refugees or those who English is not their first language. And I feel so lucky here in DeKalb to have these services, and I'm always reminded that it would be very different and difficult if I were in a different county. But Aparna is just one of those amazing people that we can call up on the phone. And I remember when I did call her and we talked about a case that we had in the solicitor's office where we had a domestic violence case where the victim was in an arranged marriage. And when she had gotten abused, it came through our office. We learned later on that obviously this was not the first time. She had been repeatedly physically abused by her husband to the extent that she had lost a child, and never reported that. But on this situation, she fled to her home country. And we were unable to get in contact with her for a long time. And her husband, who she'd been married off to, was a rather prominent man of means here in DeKalb County. And he had a great lawyer, and ultimately was trying to discredit her. When we finally talked to her, and Aparna was a part of the conversation of that's where understanding the culture comes in and what was happening. We learned that she was very fearful for herself, but one of the reasons she stayed is she was fearful for her family in her home country. Because the man that she'd been arranged to be married to, his family and her family lived in the same area, and her family was very poor. And the threats that he was making was, well, if you leave, then I'm going to make sure that your family doesn't have what they need back home. So it's understanding, not accepting that this is the norm in other cultures, but understanding the cultural differences that sometimes affect how victims may stay or not stay, what they're do or not do. She didn't want to come back to the United States to testify against her abuser. And we didn't want him to find a new bride. We didn't. Because we knew that was what was going to happen. He was going to find another bride. And we'd find ourselves in this same situation. But I remember calling Aparna and saying, help me understand what's going on. And immediately she was like, oh, I can tell you. This is exactly what's happening. This is what goes on in this particular country. This is the culture. This is what happens in an arranged marriage. These are the financial expectations that happen in that arranged marriage. And this is what the family gets. And so it was a real issue. But understanding those cultural dynamics can make a big difference for someone that is suffering silently, which she was, in a country where she'd been married off to a man that was abusing her every day. And she felt that she had to just take it so that her family back home didn't bear the brunt of that situation. So thank you for the work that you do. It is currently 11:42. We are going to take a very brief break, if we could. I'm going to make everybody come back in 3 minutes at 11:45, where we are going to hear from Georgia Latinos Against Domestic Violence. I encourage you again, if you're tuning in at home, thank you for doing so. We only have a few more speakers, and we're ending the day with a phenomenal survivor that you don't want to miss. So thank you so much, and let's start back at 11:45. Welcome back to the 5th Annual Domestic Violence Symposium. We are building bridges, making connections, coordinating a community response to domestic violence. Once again, I am Sherry Boston. I am your Solicitor General here in DeKalb County, and proud to be sponsoring this event. If you're tuning in at home on DCTV, thank you for tuning in to hear this information. We are live tweeting if you are watching us live. At Sherry Boston SG is my Twitter handle, and hashtagging SG Says No More. Thank you so much for being here with us. And let's get started. I'd like to welcome Michelle Toledo Canais. Did I say that right? Caíñas. Michelle Toledo Caíñas, who is Georgia Latinos Against Domestic Violence Program Director with Ser Familia. She has spent more than 100 hours combined in presentations and training in domestic violence, and has served on the advisory board of Encuentro Latino. She will discuss domestic violence and the Hispanic community. Please help me welcome Michelle.
Buenos dias. Good morning. Thank you for having me here today. Like Sherry said, my name is Michelle Toledo Caíñas, or in English, Caínas. We dropped the ñ off. As we have heard through the morning, domestic violence can happen to anyone, females, males, children. It doesn't matter your socioeconomic, your religion, your education. But when we're addressing this topic with the Latino community, I really have to say that I actually have learned to be Latina in Georgia. I was born in Puerto Rico and grew up very, in an Americanized home. And I actually spoke more English than Spanish. I actually picked up my Spanish in Virginia and here. So I'm actually, as I've been working with victims of domestic violence, I'm also learning, my own culture, which I kind of put in the back burner. So I'm learning to do this in a sense of learning our own norms, values, and beliefs. Working with victims and survivors of domestic violence has taught me so much, in essence, because I have seen how our culture, how our values do impact our perception when we talk about domestic violence. When addressing the Latino community and domestic violence, it's important to remember that Latinos are a very diverse group. I'm half Cuban, so when I speak to my grandmother sometimes, I actually insult her with words from Puerto Rico. So we need to remember that just because we are Latinos and may speak Spanish, we don't have the same dialect. It's very important to remember that. So how we perceive domestic violence may also it's different. Therefore, while the women share the same experience, how they respond to it and how they get services may be different. A recent study conducted by No Más, No More, which we have been hearing about today, surveyed 800 Latina women this year. And through that, we saw how they perceive what causes domestic violence. We know what causes domestic violence as laypersons, as advocates. But to hear how they perceived it, what caused, it's an amazing thing because it helps us understand and how to provide better culture-specific services. So through that study, we heard that they see that domestic violence happens because of alcohol and drugs. We know that's not the cause of domestic violence. It does increase the violence, but that's why they think it happens, and that's why they think it does happen. We also know that they think lack of good parenting is a reason. We can provide parenting programs. We know that parenting, breaking the cycle, is important. And also the lack of respect for the opposite sex. I will say that having heard my clients, I have heard that, well, he doesn't respect me or he has cheated on me, so maybe there has been conflict in the home. So that goes all back to the beginning. Where do we break the cycle? Where do we start educating? Education is very important. So understanding this impact helps us better as an agency to be able to provide services. In Georgia, the Latino population has increased over 103% in the last 10 years. We're here, we're staying. What can I tell you, I have heard there's about 90,000 Puerto Ricans in Georgia. I want to gather all us together and create our own little county. So we are here. There's a great diversity. We heard earlier today that DeKalb County is one of the most diverse counties ever. So we know we're here. Just gotta accept that, In the last 61%, though, of those Latinos living in Georgia speak no English or very little English, and 3.9% speak their indigenous language. So that means, for example, Mexico itself has 63 dialects. So not everyone from Mexico will speak Spanish. Furthermore, Latinos, as we heard from our partner earlier, there are certain fears and barriers that may not cause someone to stand up and get the services that they need. For Latinos, those three major fears that we found in that survey of No Más was the deportation, the removal of their children, and the cycle of violence continuing at their own home or their family members. So once again, it is fear. Fear is the biggest cause of victims not coming forward. But when talking to Latinos, those three are important to keep in mind, because when they do not want to recant their stories or they don't want to continue with prosecution, it's not because they want to keep the abuser home. It's not because they want to continue the violence at home. It's because they sincerely are afraid of the consequences that may come if those resources are not in place, if those safety plans are not done correctly. That's why. So as a community, and I keep hearing today community response, it is important to keep this community response available, to be culturally knowledge, culturally proficient, and have the right resources when we do talk to the Latino community about domestic violence. Domestic violence, in essence, for them is also the use of the word family violence, because it happens in the family. It may not just be the abuser with the primary victim, but it can happen in the family, and then it continues the cycle. It was just recently brought to my attention, and by recently I mean it's going to be 3 years now, that my older half-sister was a survivor of domestic violence. Her relationship started at 17 years old, and it ended when it was 24. It started in Puerto Rico, and it continued all the way to Miami. I was 16 years old when my sister got out. I did not find out until I was 35 years old, and that tells you how old I am now. So as you can tell, not having that conversation impacted so many things. Everyone used to ask me, why do I do this job? Some people even asked, are you a survivor? And the answer was always no. I just did it. It just kind of landed on my lap. But now it has a whole new purpose and a whole new meaning. I don't think my sister should have gone 6 years in her life being abused, degraded. She, for one, spoke already for the first time in a short video that she gave me so I can promote it. And when I heard the things that he did to her, I simply cried. And I have heard a lot. But what impacted me was the fact that no one in my family spoke about it. It was silent. I am breaking that cycle with my own family. I'm taking a stand because I have also learned in the last month the family violence impacts our elders in our Latino community. And we have to talk about this. We kind of label it domestic violence, child abuse, teen dating violence, but the truth is it is just simply violence, and it needs to stop at the home. I took a stand when I called Adult Protective Services in Miami to report abuse that my grandmother was happening. Unfortunately, I have to say that it was not a very good experience. I have not spoken to my grandmother in a month. I don't even know what's going on. My uncle has complete power and control. And I stand here helpless. But that is not going to stop me from breaking the cycle in another home or creating our community to stay no more, no más. La vergüenza para. The shame stops. And I'll speak up. I want to take the time to thank again Sherry Boston for having us here, for having said familia. I know my executive director has spoken before, so I am hoping I did a good job as she did. But I want to say that I am here. I'll be in the back talking. This is a very important topic. And though we may be from different cultures, I think we all have one purpose, and that's to have peaceful homes and live violence-free. Thank you. Gracias.
Next, I would like to invite, I actually have to start and say peace and love, because I know that's how our next speaker is going to start his speech. That's how he starts every conversation and ends every conversation. I can't say it with that deep voice that he does, but you're going to hear it and you'll see why I adore Suleiman Nuruddin so much. He's the director of men's education with Men Stopping Violence, and he also helped lead our group discussions earlier for those of you that were in the room. Let me welcome him back to the podium to discuss working with batterers.
Peace and love, everyone. I am indeed honored to be here to represent Men Stopping Violence, and again to add to say thank you, Sherry, for all the work that you all are doing here in DeKalb in terms of creating forums like this for us to come together, to have a conversation, to have a dialogue, to address this issue. Thank you for that. Men Stopping Violence has worked in DeKalb County for over 30 years now. We are a nonprofit social change organization with a focus to end male violence against women and girls and create safe communities for women and girls. We do that work primarily with men. Now, a lot of organizations, I think there are maybe a little over 20 organizations in DeKalb County that are certified through the Georgia Commission on Family Violence that do this work. One of the things that sort of sets Men Stopping Violence apart from those organizations is the work that we do in our 24-week educational program. We have designed an educational program for all men, not just a certain sector of men. We believe that all men can benefit from an educational program that teaches and educates us how to be in relationships and not have to use aggression or violence or abusive or controlling behaviors, that we can be men and be in a relationship and create equality. So we spend a lot of time working in the community, creating those kinds of ideas and thoughts. We learned years ago that working with individual men in a classroom setting is not going to end violence against women. We see such a small, minute percentage of men who abuse women. We have to figure out, how do we get to the masses of men? How do we get to where men are and have conversations at our colleges, at our universities, at our civic organizations, our fraternities, our Rotary clubs, our other organizations, our faith-based institutions? How do we have conversations to create awareness and begin to get men involved in this? So through our educational program, we've created a program where men who enroll in our program become part of an institution that's set up to create safe communities for women and girls. Part of the responsibility for every man that comes into our class is that he has to bring men from his community to be part of the program. Every man has to do a community project. That community project involves him soliciting and bringing together at least 4 men from his community that he will engage in a conversation, in a dialogue, in a program, in a study around some aspect of our curriculum and creating more information. At the end of the program, he has to present that proposal and he has to bring those men with him to witness his work. Thereby, we go beyond just the individual man. This man now has involved other men in his life who become aware, who began to go back to their communities and have conversations. So at the barbershop, when that rap is going on and we're talking about women, somebody will probably say, well, man, let's slow that down a little bit. Let's check that conversation, man. Let's think about, how are we talking about our sisters? How are we talking about our mothers? How are we talking about our daughters? And all of a sudden something happens and men begin to think and talk a different conversation. Men Stopping Violence believes that if we're going to end violence against women, it's about men standing up, men taking responsibility, men holding each other accountable, saying that this behavior is not acceptable and we want to change it. So we do a lot of work in our classroom. In addition to that, we have a program called Community Restoration for men who have completed the 24-week program and they want to do more in the community. These men come together, they meet every other week, they talk about legislation, they meet with legislators, they talk about laws and things that are coming up that can be good for women. We also get involved in advocacy in terms of supporting organizations and women's work. We also speak to issues that come up in the media and talking about different things that happen in the media, giving voice to it and challenging some of the things that are going on. There's also an internship program for young men who are wanting to learn more about this and be part of the movement. We have a volunteer program. We also have a program for men who want to be facilitators and teaching and educating men how to do this work in their community. In addition to that, we have a program called Because We Have Daughters. This is an amazing program. Years ago, the question came to us as a staff, what about the men who will never come to Men Stopping Violence, Suleiman? How do we engage those men? And someone said, because we have daughters. What we know is that none of us as fathers want our daughters to grow up or experience unhealthy relationships, a place where it's not safe for her, a place where she may be abused or battered or hurt or harmed. So because of that, dads come forward. So we created a day where fathers and daughters come together and have an opportunity to engage with their daughters in activities that are fun-related, an opportunity to have some quality time with daughters, because we do that with sons, but we don't necessarily do that with daughters. So we created that space. And while we're there, we have a conversation with the dads about what it's like for your daughter to grow up in this society, the things that she's experiencing, the challenges that she's having. How are we listening to her voice, her reality, her experience. And thereby things begin to happen, and there's a connection that's being made between dads and daughters. And we continue our relationship with those fathers to grow even more awareness. In addition to that, we also do local, national, international training. We have trained in over 44 states in the United States and over 8 countries outside of the United States. And we also do a lot of local training with churches, and we go into our masjids, our synagogues, our churches, having conversations with pastors, rabbis, imams about this issue. We meet with our clergy, our clinical community, talking with therapists and counselors about what it is to create safe spaces for women to have sessions with a man who may not be treating her safely, and how do they work through that. So we get a lot of referrals from there. So we're having conversations in the communities that makes a difference. We also spend a lot of time at our colleges and universities, going in, talking with the fraternities, talking with sororities, and having conversations about what it is to have safe relationships and what that looks like, thereby bringing about more awareness. And we continue to do this work because we do believe men can change. We do believe that. We believe that it's all about learned behavior. It's not a mental health issue. It's about what I witnessed growing up, what I experienced, what I hear, what I've learned as I grow forward. And how do we begin to change that? By bringing men together and creating a space for men to have conversations and challenge and confronting each other. I want to thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you, and I look forward to doing more of this. Thank you for being here too, all right? Peace and love.
All right, now I'd like to welcome up Pastor Nancy Christensen, who's the senior pastor at St. John's Lutheran Church on Ponce de Leon Avenue, which also happens to be my home church, and she is my pastor. Her former positions include pastor of community life at Cross and Crown Lutheran Church, pastor developer of Epiphany Lutheran Church, assistant to the bishop for the Southeastern Synod, and director of evangelical mission for the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. And she's going to speak to us about domestic violence and the faith community. Please help me welcome Pastor Nancy.
Good morning. Let me first of all reintroduce myself. I'm a resident of 30341 in DeKalb County, and I am a survivor. I have known real fear in my own home, and I have known real fear in my own church. It happens everywhere. This is personal for me. So I thank Sherry and DeKalb County for giving me the opportunity to speak on behalf of the faith community. I was here last year, and I began with a story adapted from a very familiar Christian text. So I'll begin there again this year. As a woman was traveling the road between romance and reality, she fell in love with a charming but insecure young man. And it came to pass after they were married that he beat her and robbed her of her dignity, and so she ran from the house, bruised and afraid, wishing she were dead. A pastor saw her swollen face and stopped to give her some advice. "Wives, submit to your husbands," he read. Then he excused himself to attend a seminar on motivating church leaders. A woman's group leader, hearing her sobs, felt a rush of pity and was thankful for her own gentle husband. She went to buy the woman a book on making your marriage work. The chair of the Social Justice Committee found out about the woman and said to the church treasurer, "How awful. Poor dear. We must do something." And they agreed to bring it up at their next meeting. And while the battered woman was wondering where she would sleep that night, a stranger greeted her and said, "Sister, come with me. We'll get you a hot meal and some clothes and find you a bed for the night." She took off her own threadbare coat and laid it on the woman's shoulders. And when they found that the crisis center was full, the stranger took the woman to her own house and gave her her own bed. And Jesus asked, which of these people was a neighbor to the woman who fell into the hands of the abuser? The one who had compassion. Go and do likewise. Faith-based institutions are not immune to the destructive effects of domestic violence. But all too often, we are guilty of turning a blind eye on these very issues. National research shows that at least 1 out of every 4 members of any given congregation is or has been a victim of or a survivor of domestic violence. Additionally, research shows that victims are more likely to seek help from a religious leader before they turn to other community resources. Unfortunately, many victims also report that when they do turn to their churches, they are often not understood, or they are given poor advice for dealing with often volatile situations. Churches are in a unique position to assist victims and their families. They must be prepared to respond with both knowledge and compassion. So, what initial steps can faith communities take to create a safe environment for those who are being victimized? First, take safety seriously. We are learning this right now. Make sure all church events are monitored carefully so that no one is left in a vulnerable position. Clearly state the expectation that all present are to be treated with love and respect at all times. Have brochures on domestic violence, posters, phone numbers in places where a victim can take the information without fear of discovery, like the restroom, for example. Educate the congregation and the surrounding community. Sponsor seminars, provide information, know the facts about domestic violence. Include discussion on this topic in all premarital counseling or in classes that are held. Open the door for conversation. Speak out on behalf of each victim and all victims, and provide opportunities for members of the congregation to volunteer with agencies or organizations that work directly with domestic violence. Above all, safe congregations know what resources are available and how to access them quickly and quietly, preserving the privacy and the dignity of the victim at all cost. And once it is clear that the environment is safe and that faith leaders and congregants are both knowledgeable and compassionate, then the likelihood of disclosure will increase. With this in mind, church people should be prepared to listen and to believe the victim, to assist in assessing current danger and in seeking safety, and to make referrals to appropriate resources. If the accused offender is also a member of the congregation, religious leaders need to respond swiftly and carefully. They should know the laws or have someone to call for assistance around either reporting the offender or guiding them into treatment. They should set clear boundaries to ensure the safety of the victim and everyone else, and avoid public confrontation or attempts at counseling. By trying to fix the problem, the religious leader often unintentionally adds to the danger for the victim. While being candid and direct is often appropriate, it is almost never helpful to respond to a potentially violent person with anger. Better to be calm and firm. Congregations need to be awake and aware and vigilant about protecting the most vulnerable ones in their communities. Children, teens, and the elderly may also be victims. No matter what the faith tradition, it is never okay for anyone to be abused in any way. While it is important to acknowledge that no one is immune from being a victim, it is still predominantly true that the offenders are male and the victims are female. There are many female pastors who are dealing with issues that male pastors never have to face. So I'll conclude by saying this. If we truly believe that all of us are created in the image of God, and if I, as a Christian person, truly believe that Jesus valued women as highly as he valued men, if we believe these things at all, then it is high time that faithful people of both genders let go of the notion that men have the right to control the women in their lives by whatever means are necessary, including violence. It is high time for faithful people to work together to create safe havens and networks of legal, medical, civic, and spiritual resources to develop strategies to address the root causes of domestic violence and to seek solutions. A religious scholar once asked Jesus, "Teacher, which commandment in the law is greatest?" And he said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. And this, my friends, is finally and forever the basis for all healthy relationship." Thank you, and amen.
Thank you so much, Pastor Nancy, for sharing your message and for being a leader in the faith community that ministers in a way that teaches all of us that love is respect. So thank you so much for that. Before we bring up our survivor, our final speaker for the day, for those of you that participated in our scavenger hunt to learn information on those, if you haven't already passed those down, please pass them to the end of the rows, and we will collect those, and I will be announcing our winners at the end of the program. So just put them above your heads, and we'll come through and collect those. And now I would like to introduce a very special guest who knows more about domestic violence than any of us who work with survivors. April Ross has experienced it firsthand. And as an assistant district attorney in Fulton County, April's story is proof that domestic violence can happen to anyone. I remember the day that April Ross was shot, and she's going to tell you her story, but I won't forget that day because she's a fellow prosecutor. And as a prosecutor, the moment that there is breaking news and one of our own has been hurt, we all immediately start to wonder what's going on. Because we recognize immediately that the work we do sometimes puts us in unsafe places. We have to put very bad people in jail. And as an assistant district attorney in Fulton County, April has to sometimes prosecute people that are dangerous. So our first thought was, what's happening here? What's going on? Who did this to one of our own? And so let me introduce to you April Ross, fellow prosecutor, and someone who is willing to share her story of how she got here today. Please help me welcome April Ross. Testing. Okay, it's working. Okay. I'm gonna, I'm gonna put this here. I'm gonna lift it up a little bit higher.
Can everyone hear me? Greetings and thank you so much. I'm so honored and happy to be here today. Thank you to Sherry Boston and her wonderful office for inviting me to come down today and speak. It's been 1.5 years since my injury. That day, my husband had been stalking me. I have no idea for how long he had been following me, but that day he pulled behind me or came behind me while I was parked in front of a friend's house, came up into the car and shot me and another person multiple times. I received 3 gunshot wounds, one through the face, one through my arm, and one in my back, which paralyzed me from the chest down. Hours later, he killed himself. My husband was somebody I knew since high school. We had dated since the 11th grade. And in the months following my injury, I began counseling. And it was difficult for me to even see that I had been in an abusive relationship. But the more I discussed and opened up and revealed things, deep secrets about my relationship that I had buried deep down and vowed to never reveal for my own sake and for his, I realized over time that I had gotten out of control and spiraled into something I couldn't get myself out of. And when I finally decided to leave my marriage, 4 months later, he lost control and attempted to take my life. But today I want to talk a little bit about something different. I'm going to share with you all something that I recently posted on my Facebook page. Because in the aftermath of the event, I've realized something even more important about the work we have cut out for ourselves. It is so difficult. I think the speaker before last was talking about how difficult it is for a survivor to speak out and to speak up for herself. And so I'm going to share what I wrote. I want to take a moment and talk about what I've experienced over the 1.5 years since I chose to break my silence following my injury. By far and most importantly, I have seen the very best of the human spirit. I am truly blessed, and I truly appreciate the outpouring of love and encouragement from so many people. It warms my heart that people near and far, strangers and friends, have uplifted me and sent prayers and strength my way. I do choose to focus on that which I have received in far greater volume. I am also motivated by a desire to drive awareness to the issue of abusive relationships and drive it into a conversation and outreach in our community, as so many more people, it seems, are now willing to admit that this is a grave societal problem that needs to be addressed by us all. But sadly, I'm also experiencing the worst from my choice to speak. Victim blaming and attacking, that mentality is an occurrence in our society that frequently affects victims' choices to speak out, when this should be the last thing they have to be focused on. Someone should never have to question whether to speak out or speak up for themselves based on fear that they will be torn down and reverse accused after enduring a horrific situation. In fact, victim blaming often plays directly into an abuser's plan because he is already looking for any opportunity to avoid responsibility for his own actions. I realize that in my circumstance, there is very deep hurt and emotions are high on all sides. Some of the lashing out that I've received, I know comes from a place of denial and hurt when people are trying to find an explanation and make sense out of something that they can't understand or can't accept, especially when it concerns someone they thought they knew. I look forward to the day when people don't choose these moments to pick sides and beat someone down who has already been broken. These are the moments when we need to embrace each other in an effort to heal the families and the community after a terrible tragedy that affected so many lives. But to be clear, I refuse to be intimidated, threatened, or attacked into silence by people who did not walk a single day in my shoes or feel anything that I felt in that relationship for so many years. It's so easy to sit in judgment of someone's life and minimize their pain when you did not endure it. I've repeatedly seen over these months since my injury, implications and wildly false allegations that somehow seem to justify his actions. Even if I was the worst possible wife, there were many better options he could have chosen. Nothing justifies his premeditated decision to try to take 2 lives. From the moment I began to share my story, I knew it would be very difficult and that it would get harder before it got better. Coping with and adapting to my physical condition alone has been more tremendous than anything I could have ever imagined facing in my lifetime. The emotional and psychological process as well has been a huge burden to bear. But I also knew that I was going to face the misplaced speculation and the judgment if I shared more of my story. And I admit that it gave me pause. I never realized until recently just how hard it was for a victim to speak up for herself. It's hard enough to have the intimate details of your life thrust into the public microscope. But we live in a society that is also very comfortable in focusing on what a victim may have done to provoke an attack, rather than the poor behavior choice of the perpetrator. But I still insist that survivors stand up for themselves. Give your testimony, despite what anyone may say. And I know this is easier said than done by personal experience. But this is just one of the many reasons that I state that I'm learning to be courageous and encouraging others to do the same. And I truly believe that God is using me and this experience for a greater purpose. And maybe I will save someone else's life. Courage is not something that can be taken lightly, and it's not easy. I admit there are many days when it's hard for me to step outside and hold my head up high and face the world. It's so easy for people who know so little in the grand scheme to pass judgment. I've been called names, and my character and dignity has been attacked. But trust me when I say, even though it's easier to be quiet, I've decided to be a fighter. And I'm going to make my voice heard. The most powerful words anyone can say to a survivor of abuse is, "I believe you." I know my character. I know who I am, and I know who I'm not. I know what happened, and I know what did not. I know why I've chosen to tell my story, and I won't stop. Thank you all.
I want to thank April for sharing her story, and we are presenting her with a beautiful bouquet of lavender roses. Because, April, we do believe you. And we thank you for being a survivor with a voice who was thrust into the public eye, not because you chose to, but because someone chose to try to take your life. And for you to use the platform that you have now in the way that you've chosen to do it, despite having to share your journey with strangers who often judge unfairly and inappropriately. Everyone in this room, survivors, the people that do the work, people that want to know more, the people watching at home, thank you for sharing and being a strong voice for survivors everywhere. Thank you. So as we conclude our day, we do have a few door prizes for those folks that answered all of our questions. And we wanted to make this a little interactive and fun and make sure, again, let me recognize all of our resource fair participants. Thank you for being here today because you have provided some great information for all the folks that are here today, and thank you for being a partner. We could not do this symposium without you. And so again, let me thank Hensma House, Caminar Latino, the Georgia Coalition Against Domestic Violence, the Georgia Commission on Family Violence, the International Women's House, Men Stopping Violence, Raksha, Ser Familia, Tapestry, the Women's Resource Center to End Domestic Violence, the DeKalb County Sheriff's Office, and especially our DeKalb County Sheriff, Jeff Mann, the DeKalb County Police Department, the Latin American Association, and the DeKalb Volunteer Lawyers Foundation. And once again, I'd like to thank my staff at the DeKalb County Solicitor's Office. It is, again, my honor and privilege every day to serve you as your DeKalb County Solicitor General. And finally, I'd also like to thank DeKalb County and DCTV, because without DCTV helping us to spread our word, we are reaching hundreds of thousands of people today in this very room that are going to hear the message that we just put out today. Every person in DeKalb County has the opportunity to turn on the TV. And you heard our interim CEO. I'm going to hold him to it. I'm going to make sure that this gets replayed on a loop for the next 364 days. All the way until we come back to this time next year, where we're going to be having our 6th annual Building Bridges, Making Connections, Coordinated Community Response. We are not going to stop until we have an opportunity to say no more. No more names on this PowerPoint, no more victims like April Ross and others, no more need for any of these nonprofits. When that day comes, I will gladly sit down. Gladly. All right, our first winner, I have Agnes Kaysen. Thank you very much, Agnes. Our second winner, I have Lucy Leroux. Did I say that right, Lucy? I like that name. I have a daughter named Lucy. And finally, I have Gwendolyn Wilson. Thank you. As we heard today and as we wind down, domestic violence is not a private problem. And there I see one of my favorite people. I have to acknowledge her. Pastor Sabrina McKenzie is here. Thank you so much for coming. Another wonderful person that uses not only her ministry, but also her celebrity in the community and on television to continue to spread the word about the problem of domestic violence. And for those of you that have been coming to these symposiums, you've heard her story before. Thank you for always being a partner and a friend to our symposium and for being here today. But domestic violence is not a private problem. And none of us should look the other way when we suspect someone is being abused. It will take all of us working together as a community to end domestic violence. We have to continue working together to help survivors get the help that they need. And we need to do more to change the attitudes that perpetrate domestic violence. Thank you so much for being a part of this coordinated community response. Thank you again to our event sponsors, without whom we could not have had our lovely breakfast today. I'd like to once again thank HHR Family Law of Hedgepeth, Heredia, and Reeder, as well as Smith & Lake for providing our meal today. To all of our speakers, all of our partners, thanks to DCTV and other news media for helping to spread awareness about National Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Again, we are partnering with Verizon. We are collecting cell phones in the back. If you have older used phones, it's not too late. We'll be collecting them in the solicitor's office through the end of the month. Please take a moment on your way out, if you didn't on your way in, to sign our pledge to say no more to domestic violence, to show your commitment to a safer community. Thank you for being here today. Once again, and finally, I am Sherry Boston. I am your Solicitor General, and I remain committed and strong to make sure that we hold offenders accountable and we continue to serve the victims here in DeKalb County. Thank you for being here with me today.
Thank you.